excellent technical support on this. For those of you that I don't know, my name is John Pattison Williams, and I'm the coordinator of the PHJV Policy Committee. And we're very thankful you can be here today, especially as December is rolling on and Christmas is coming. I know these our schedules all get quite busy. So today is the third of our theme on grassland conservation initiatives in Canada. And just a little plug for in January, we'll be hearing from the JV8. And in February, we'll be hearing from our colleagues in Manitoba around initiatives there. But today we are focusing on Alberta. And I'd like to introduce and welcome Mark Kavanagh today. He is a director of the Alberta Prairie Conservation Forum. And I'm not sure how long he's done that, but he has quite a diverse career in environmental consulting and in the Environmental and Utilities Commission here in Alberta, and has a background in zoology from the University of Calgary. So I want to welcome Mark. And Mark, if you want to put your camera on just for a moment so people can see the face of our presenter today, that would be great. There he is. And he won't wear any of the masks from behind him, I don't. So take it away, Mark. I'll be the slide mover today. So I'll just be silently in the background. And if you want to turn off your video as you present as well, sometimes that helps for bandwidth. So thanks, everyone. And thank you, Mark.
Great. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, John. And as John said, my name is Mark Kavanagh, and I'm a director of the Prairie Conservation Forum. I've been involved with the PCF for about 5 years or so now. I started when I worked for the Alberta Utilities Commission. We worked with the Prairie Conservation Forum to help develop guidelines for conserving prairie when developing alternative energy projects. From that, I became a director. I've now retired from the Alberta Utilities Commission, and I am focusing primarily on, let's say, charitable work and benevolent work of various kinds. So I've been a director of the PCF for about 3 years now. My primary role is to help coordinate and organize webinars in support of the mandate of the PCF. So if you or anyone you know is doing work that they would like to publicize, and the Prairie Conservation Forum can help in that publicity, please get a hold of me. I'll be glad to help coordinate the webinar and help you produce it. So with that, I'd like to begin this presentation. As Ian suggested, please send any comments or questions you have via the chat line. Now, I hope you can appreciate I'll be talking about a lot of projects that have been done by a variety of people. And to be honest, I'm not an expert in the work that's ongoing. So if there are any questions that I can't answer, please include your contact information so that I can get back to you in the future with a more complete answer if I'm not able to provide one during this presentation. So with that, Ian, if you could please flip to the first slide, or the next slide. Or is that John?
That's me, Mark. I'm your slide mover. Is this the slide you like?
Yeah, that's the first one. Please go to the next one.
Okay.
Has it been changed? Uh-oh.
It has been changed, yeah. So we're now at the organizations within the Prairie Conservation Forum.
Oh, that's very interesting. Just so you know, I only have the title page showing. We had a similar problem yesterday, but okay, we'll just continue. As we go through this slide, I'm going to have to refer to my notes here, so please forgive me.
That's fine.
Just in order to keep up with the chart.
Sorry to interject. Can I confirm, Ian, are you seeing the slides moving?
Yes, I am. You're on the Prairie Conservation Action Plans.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the second slide, Mark.
Well, that's bizarre. Okay. Well, thank you. And thank everyone for your patience while we work this out. So the Prairie Conservation Forum was developed with the help of the World Wildlife Fund, the governments of Canada, and the provincial governments of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. It was developed with the aim of developing a technical document called a Prairie Conservation Action Plan. Now, originally, the group that was established was called the Prairie Conservation Coordinating Committee, and they developed the first plan under that name in 1988. In 1989, the group changed its name formally to the Alberta Prairie Conservation Forum. We continue in that vein today. Next slide, please.
Okay.
The Prairie Conservation Forum is a coalition of about 50 different organizations. They represent various agricultural, conservation, resource organizations, resource management organizations, as well as government agencies and regulators, industry, academia, and individuals. So it's a wide spectrum of organizations and groups that participate in the Prairie Conservation Forum. The vision of the forum, the next slide, please. The Prairie Conservation Forum vision is to ensure that the biological diversity of native prairie and parkland ecosystems is secure under the thoughtful and committed stewardship of Albertans. So the PCF then provides a continuing focus on the collective, collaborative stewardship of Alberta's native prairie and parkland. So it's important that we appreciate that it is a collaborative effort. We are not an advocacy group other than to advocate for good research. So next slide, please. The Prairie Conservation Action Plans have been developed since its inception in 1988. We're currently working on the 7th Prairie Conservation Action Plan, which I refer to as the PCAP. Each PCAP has been developed with membership involvement and is typically released with a written forward provided by an Alberta government representative, a cabinet minister typically. The Prairie Conservation Action Plans are developed every 5 years. And as I said, they are developed with the cooperative input of our membership. Next slide, please. So native prairie, let's define that for a moment before we continue our discussion. As most of you would know, of course, is defined for our purposes as the unbroken areas of grassland or aspen parkland that is dominated by non-introduced species. We define the native prairie as to include the soil, hydrology, vegetation, climate, microbes, wildlife, landscape features, and the ecological processes inherent to all of those. Next slide, please. In developing the Prairie Conservation Action Plans, we develop a series of maps that identify high-value landscapes. Those landscape features are delineated based upon a convergent spatial information from multiple sources. What that means is we utilize a variety of existing databases. We coalesce that information in such a way as to then develop maps that can better emphasize the high value landscapes where we want to focus our attention, our conservation efforts. The information sources that we utilize include, but are not limited to, the PCF's Native Prairie Reconnaissance Inventory, the Grassland Vegetation Inventory, Ecosystems Goods and Services Mapping, the Environmentally Significant Areas Inventory, Priority Areas for Multiple Species at Risk, MSARS, and the Conservation Blueprint Priorities that are identified by the Nature Conservancy of Canada. We utilize those data, put them into this GPS mapping function, and we develop a series of maps, as is shown by the next couple slides. If you could please advance the slides, you'll see a series of maps that come forward and develop into one large map showing the high-valued landscapes of the prairies. Can you advance the slides? Do that, John, please.
Yeah, I've got that for them.
Okay, great. And can you stop when you get to the slide that's entitled Making a Difference? I'm sorry, I feel like I am doing this blind because I can't actually see the slides as they're progressing. It's something with my computer. So it's important to emphasize then that with such a diverse membership, the PCF is not an advocacy group. We don't take actions such as lobbying governments or engaging in activities such as opposing parks or industrial projects. We don't undertake activities that will divide our membership. We are advocates, quite simply, for the prairie conservation action plans that we then put forward and help publicize. That is the nature of the advocacy that we do, is just to help encourage work that may not otherwise be done. And we do that through 4 main ways. First is we develop plans and policies. These are that are related to the conservation of native prairie. These include things such as the National Wildlife Area for Suffield, provincial grasslands inventories, the Government of Alberta policy regarding the mitigation and reclamation for conventional and renewable energy. That was where I got involved with the PCF. And then conserving native ecosystems in regional plans, such as there were 7 plans being developed for Alberta: the Athabasca area, Southern Saskatchewan River Basin Plan, and so forth were under development. We were contributing to those. We also developed a number of information sources and tools for our membership, such as the Native Prairie Vegetation Inventory, and we contribute to the Grassland Vegetation Inventory as well. The PCF also undertakes numerous projects that may not otherwise be undertaken. We undertake projects such as developing landscape patterns. We develop reports such as the state of biodiversity, connectivity, and state of the prairie. And I'll be talking about those projects in a little bit more detail shortly. We also raise awareness about prairie conservation. We have a series of programs such as our Deep Roots program, the Helen Schuler Native Garden. We organize field trips for youth to the Blood Tribe area. We have a website which we utilize and publicize to distribute and disseminate information. And we also organize conferences, such as the Prairie Conservation and Endangered Species Conference, which I'll be discussing at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. So the current Prairie Conservation Action Plan identifies 3 main long-term outcomes. And I'll be discussing those in some detail. Basically, what we are advocating, or at least, in 2011, 2015, we were advocating for a major shift. That is, we wanted to link the recommendations, the recommended conservation actions that we've been developing in the previous Prairie Conservation Action Plans. We wanted to move that forward, and we did that by developing 3 overarching strategic outcomes that are emphasized in the current action plan. And those outcomes are listed here: maintaining large native prairie and parkland landscapes, conserving connecting corridors for biodiversity, and protecting isolated native habitats. And I'll be talking about each one of those long-term outcomes in a little bit more detail now. Next slide, please. So the first strategic outcome, to maintain large native prairies and parkland landscapes, is one of the main focuses of our group because we are promoting conservation. And as we all know, in order to help sustain biodiversity and so forth, the larger the area that can be conserved, the greater the biodiversity and greater stability in general. So what we're trying to do then is to promote large landscape conservation in order to understand the changes that are undergoing in those areas. Prairie conservation, or at least prairie areas, as you may know, is perhaps one of the most threatened ecosystems in Western Canada in terms of conversion from its native state to developed agricultural lands. We are advocating then minimal disturbance and minimal disturbance of native prairie and restoration of industrial footprints on native prairie. We also encourage stewardship among land managers. So in general then, the Prairie Conservation Forum would lead, promote, and facilitate planning that would help preserve and conserve large-scale landscapes. Next slide, please. Part of that presentation is what we call multi-SAR. Multi-SAR then is basically the multi-strategic species at risk. So what we're doing here is undertaking inventories, such as wildlife surveys and assessments, on a large scale so as to develop pasture-specific management recommendations in consultation with the landowner. So we're not doing this in isolation. We're not doing it just as academics. We are working with landowners. The intention then is to improve native prairie habitat and then go back periodically and monitor it and ensure that the improvements are working as intended. Next slide, please. The PCF also offers a range stewardship course. It's an annual collaborative effort that we delivered primarily to youth and young people entering into careers related to agriculture or life on native prairies. Before COVID, we offered a one-day workshop with both field and online events, giving people a basic introduction to range management and grazing and so forth. Now, since COVID, we have gone strictly online with webinars on basic range land management and grazing principles and practices. We also discussed range and riparian health and much more. Hopefully, we'll return to an in-person presentation, or at least an in-person format, in 2022. So please look for that, the Range Stewardship course. Very good hands-on product. Next slide. Oh, there. I've now got a slide that says Range Steward, State of the Prairie Project is coming through. Thank you very much, John. I don't know why things are different.
That's good.
Okay, so I hope everyone's getting these slides. So the Prairie Conservation prides itself in developing a State of the Prairie project. What this is a technical report. It's a broad-scale GIS analysis that focuses on two main questions. That is, what is the current extent of native vegetation features of the prairie and parkland natural regions of Alberta? And what changes have occurred in those areas from the earliest data sets in the 1990s to the latest? 11 data sets were used to determine the extent, change, to verify and validate the native vegetation features. And the data were then analyzed using another number of stratifications at various geographic scales. We had a very broad scale at the natural region level, looking at grass and parklands. At an intermediate level, looking at natural subregions such as mixed grass, and at the eco-district level, such as the Lethbridge Plain. The data were also analyzed by administrative area, such as Lethbridge County, and by tenure, such as private versus pasture land, or private versus public lands. This analysis did not assess the state at the local level as such, because condition, fragmentation, invasive species, and change at the local level were just too complex to evaluate in this particular report. For more information, we encourage you to visit the PCF website, which is Alberta PCF, all one word, .org, O-R-G. Next slide, please. The State of the Prairie Project is an ongoing project. The next slide talks about our next steps. We are developing an occasional paper. It has been basically written and is undergoing a series of edits. The purpose is to discuss the results of the technical paper in terms that the average reader could listen, in layman terms, in other words. We developed a communication plan using multimedia online sources such as Facebook and Instagram last year that highlighted some of the results of the technical paper. As the paper is finalized, we will further develop this multimedia campaign and ramp up the new year with highlighting the results of this occasional paper. So please keep your eyes open for it. We're also producing a video for municipalities that showcase a couple of the municipalities that have conserved native prairie and the benefits that those municipalities have directly gained from the conservation efforts. We'll also be hosting a workshop for municipalities to go through the results of the technical report and show them how to use the data for themselves. So we'll be updating the data set with 2020 data from the Agriculture and Agri-Foods Canada land use data set. Next slide, please. So the second long-term outcome of the current Prairie Conservation Action Plan is to conserve connecting corridors for biodiversity. What we're doing now is analyzing the location and significance of those corridors. We will also be building awareness and networking in regard to supporting those corridors and enhancing them wherever possible. We'll also be promoting stewardship, trying to encourage others to get involved in these efforts. And lastly, we establish trans-boundary connections. That's always been a very big part of the PCF, is our relationship with our American neighbors, as well as those in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. And we will be continuing to hold annual trans-boundary workshops rotating between Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Montana that are specifically dealing with connectivity. Next slide, please. So after consulting with experts in the field of habitat connectivity, the Prairie Conservation Forum is working to build a tool to help guide management decisions while maintaining habitat connectivity. The tool will be aimed at municipal levels of planning, but will also be publicly available for anyone and everyone to use. This tool will be available by the end of March 2022, and the PCF will be hosting workshops on how to use it. The Vision tool will help guide those users and land use planners in recognizing high-value connectivity areas, very specifically with the idea of conserving native prairie and avoiding unnecessary development in particularly high-valued landscapes. Next slide, please. The trans-boundary connections. The PCF initiated the Trans-Boundary Grassland Partnership in 2016. Annual workshops have been held every year since then, with the location of the workshop rotating between Alberta, Montana, and Saskatchewan. Unfortunately, COVID did put a little wrench in the works, and so we haven't had that workshop in the last couple of years in person. The 2021 workshop was held online and recorded. Sessions can be found at the PCF website. So that's the trans-boundary connections. Next slide, please. The third long-term outcome of the current Prairie Conservation Action Plan is to protect isolated native habitats. This work has just begun this year, and we are in the process of identifying obligate grassland species and species at risks that are specific to native prairies and parklands. Those lists are being complied, and details of those, including habitat requirements, will be summarized and put into a publication. The purpose of doing so is to identify the areas where native prairie habitats are particularly prevalent, and then identify the value or values of those isolated parcels of land. Next slide, please. So the Prairie Conservation Forum then does more than just the technical work that I've been describing. We have an outreach program that is very specifically intended to help improve awareness and to educate people about the benefits of native prairie. So our educational programming then promotes and produces materials and products for both rural and urban audiences. That's important. It's important for us to realize that many of us focus on the rural nature of our interest in native prairies, but there are many people that live in cities that value and study native grasslands as well. So in order to promote native prairie conservation then, the PCF organizes conferences, events, speaking engagements such as this one, and webinars. As I said before, I'm the director in charge of the PCF webinars. If you have a webinar that you would like to help promote, we'll be glad to get involved and invite our membership to participate. So please get a hold of me if you have a webinar. Next slide, please. One of the big initiatives of the PCF is its Deep Roots program. It's an educational video conference presentation that's developed very specifically for school-aged children from grades 4 through 9. We developed a series of pre and post presentation activities that then accompany the teacher's lesson plan. So it's not just a presentation that is a one-time event for that class, but it's actually a series of activities that the teachers can engage the students in using our video materials as a starting point. So, Deep Roots, check it out online. Next slide, please. As I said before, the Prairie Conservation Forum has been promoting conferences since its inception. With the provinces of Manitoba and Saskatchewan, we've been offering the Prairie Conservation and Endangered Species Conference every 3 years, and we rotate the location from province to province. 2 years ago was Alberta's turn, but that was just in time for COVID to hit, and we could not offer in-person conference, so the conference was temporarily postponed. We are looking at offering it in the 2022 year. We're hoping it's going to be in person. We're making moves in that direction, but we're a little bit nervous about quite frankly, the cost of non-refundable deposits of the event venues. So we wouldn't want to put aside $20,000 to reserve a venue that is then postponed or canceled due to COVID. So that's our impediment at the current time. But we will be having a conference as soon as we possibly can. We encourage you to watch out for this one. It should be a good one. It's usually very well attended. Close to 1,000 people attend. And we're hoping to have a similar kind of audience when the COVID restrictions are relaxed and we can appropriately gather safely. So the very last slide, please. The Prairie Conservation then is working to conserve the biological diversity of native prairie ecosystems, and we've been doing so for over 30 years. We do so because we are a collaborative, non-exclusive consortium of organizations, companies, government agencies, and individuals with one aim in mind, and that is to conserve native prairies and enhance native prairies wherever possible. So I encourage you to look up the Alberta Prairie Conservation Forum. The web address is at the bottom of this particular slide. Feel free to utilize the materials, get a hold of us if you have any questions, and as I've said before, get a hold of me if you have any webinars that you would like help promoting. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Let me just stop sharing here. Turn my video on as well. Yeah, so first of all, I guess we can virtually give you a round of applause for that talk today. Thank you very much. And now we have a bit of time for questions. Thanks, Kristen. I see the clapping hands. Danielle, that's great. We got the whole gang here. Yeah, are there any questions from the group? And if you could either type it in or speak it if you prefer, that's fine. Okay.
Oh, I see Danielle.
Yeah, Danielle, go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you for the presentation. Really enjoyed it and very comprehensive and enjoyed learning about it. I guess I'm really interested in the technical aspects of the State of Environment report that you're working on. And in the meantime, I've looked up the previous one. I guess I just wanted to comment that I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing, and I'm interested in learning more on some of the technical aspects of the inventories you're using and your methodology. So I may follow up with you after to pick your brain a little bit about that. Just a general comment at this point. So thank you very much for your presentation, and interested in learning more about it.
Very good. But to be honest, I haven't seen the current State of the Prairie report yet. It's being developed by 2 other specialists, and now it's being edited by a whole body of people. Quite frankly, what I've found before is that the technical work tends to be very, very good. I am more of an advocate than perhaps our group is. And so some of the stronger recommendations that some people make are often toned down so as to ensure that we don't alienate our membership. So we do focus on the technical aspects of the work. We try and minimize the advocacy part of the work other than ensuring good science is done.
Sure. I really appreciate, I guess, the technical work you are undertaking and see high value in that. So thank you very much.
Are there other questions? Maybe I can ask one. You know, the Prairie Habitat joint venture is different, but yet has some similarities, I would assume, in terms of we have a large group of membership and different organizations that are part of the decision making and the board of the organization. And I guess sometimes what happens is, like you're saying, there's a challenge where some of the messaging might be toned down, or when you try to you don't want to become an advocacy group in some ways because of diverse interests from the stakeholders. So how do you manage that with PCAP? I guess the one thing you've said is that nothing is too strong, but do you think that is a strength or weakness, or what lessons could you share with us that might be in a similar situation?
I truly think it's a strength. To be honest, the groups were the PCF was formed with the direct involvement of provincial government staff. And in order to ensure their objectivity as government regulators, they cannot be seen to be part of any advocacy group. And so there is a very vital, important role for advocacy groups in terms of the work that we do. But this group is focused primarily on ensuring good science and trying to ensure more work is being done in areas where it would not otherwise be done. If we were working strictly as advocates for or against any particular position, I think that the availability of funding and technical expertise would be reduced. By not taking politically sensitive positions on things of that kind, we can avoid that kind of divisive nature that is sometimes apparent in the work that we do.
Right, thank you. Yeah, great answer. That's what I was hoping. Thank you.
Yeah, and as I said, personally, I'd like to be more of an advocate and to use the PCF as more of an advocating position, but I think that would undermine its credibility and its acceptance by others.
Sure. Any other questions?
Well, I just want to say that the PCF is quite frankly the people that belong to it. I joined the PCF because I was truly impressed. I was asked to speak to them about some of the work I was doing when I worked at the Alberta Utilities Commission. And I was really impressed with the quality of the work that people were doing and the enthusiasm and passion people have for native prairie. To be honest, I'm not a grass expert or anything of that kind, but to go out in the field with some of these people after the forest fire in Waterton, it was just absolutely astounding to see the flowers and to walk with people that could identify flowers that they hadn't seen in 20 years. The group of people that are truly committed to the PCF is really what makes the group special for me, and that's why I get involved. And so I would like to invite anyone that's listening now, if you're interested in getting involved, come out, check out a meeting or two, see if you like it. You don't have to join right away, but just come out and check us out and see what you think. If you'd like to get involved as a director, we're always looking for recruits. And please feel free to get a hold of me if it interests you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mark. This is an excellent talk, and I hope that we can all take that to heart too, and to reach out to Mark if he has any questions or if we'd like to get involved. Thank you. And then my last announcement before we close off today is that I believe it's January 12th is our next webinar for the PHJV Policy Committee. And Graham Patterson, who was on the call here today from the Joint Venture 8, the Grasslands Initiative, will be presenting that day. So we really look forward to that and hope you can all attend. So thank you, Mark. Round of applause again, and hope you all have a good holiday, and we'll see you in the new year.
Thank you, John.